Kelly Bennett from SuperTalk Mississippi News is joining me. Kelly, great to have you on. How are you?
Good morning, guys. I'm waiting on my music. I don't hear it. Okay, Rhino. There it is.
Now it's official. Now I can officially say hi.
Yes. Hi. It's a pleasure to meet you.
I wasn't even aware. Wasn't even aware that I needed to wait for music, so it's my fault.
No, you sound great.
Well, thank you. I'm having fun. It's good to be back on the radio in Mississippi. A lot going on, too, with elections coming up. I want to make sure everybody is aware of the voting information and see a high voter turnout. Sometimes these off-cycle elections, people forget about them or don't get out to vote.
That's true. But the election is coming up April 1st. The way it works in Mississippi, you vote party first during the primaries, and then you're choosing a candidate who will run in the general election in June. So if you want to look at some of the major races, we've got it online for you at supertalk.fm. And you can get a rundown. I think one of the most interesting races is going to be what's going on in Jackson with the current mayor under indictment. And I think there are like 12 candidates running for mayor in Jackson. So that's going to be a big one.
Bit of a mess. Yeah, that's an interesting election. And with so many candidates running, I talked about this on my podcast the other day about ranked choice voting, which is a horrible idea. And this is one of the examples that I actually used in having that conversation. If you're not familiar with the concept of ranked choice voting, you basically say, okay, I like this guy best, but if that candidate doesn't win, this guy's not so bad. I would take him as a second choice. And they keep going down the list until there's a plurality of votes. It might work in electing a homecoming queen, a popularity contest, but when you got 12 candidates running, you're going to wind up with a horrible candidate that actually gets elected because there's no general consensus. And that's one of the problems with ranked choice voting, which is I know way off topic, Kelly, but it's a whole other, it's worth talking about because some states are considering switching to that. I think Alaska already has it.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I'm not going in and changing the laws. That's not my job. I just report on it when it happens. But I see your point, and it does create a lot of potential for runoffs, for sure. And it's hard to get people to the polls already. So then you have a runoff. You're asking them to go out again. And I can see how that could be an issue.
We need to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat, and the voter ID and some of the executive orders that the president is looking at are a great start for that. This story, I'm sure, will get some national attention. The Mississippi Attorney General's office launching a new partnership with ICE to enable local officials to work with the federal government, something that's being contested in many other cities and states.
Yeah, I think, though, you get a lot of the southern states that when Trump came into office, they were like, oh, yeah, we're ready to cooperate. And we do have quite a few stories come through the newsroom where we have these illegal people coming into the state, and they're creating havoc and committing crimes. And so I'm not surprised to see the Attorney General's office do what they can to help with.
And it's nice to actually see some cooperation with the federal officials, federal law enforcement.
Well, we're not a sanctuary state, so there is that.
Good. We haven't seen Kristi Noem swoop into Mississippi yet, but that's not out of the question. There's certainly a drug traffic pipeline through the state that needs to be addressed as some of these international gangs continue to extend their tentacles across the country.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Kristi Noem because we had a story that ran this week, and actually the Homeland Security Secretary has vowed to eliminate FEMA. Now, this is a big deal for the state of Mississippi, where we're impacted by hurricanes frequently. And the beleaguered agency, of course, handles relief and recovery after disasters like hurricanes. They've also been giving money to illegals to stay in hotels across the country and that kind of thing. But let's get back to the FEMA part of this. Last week, President Trump signed an executive order that called for state and local governments to play a more significant role in disaster preparation. Now, if you've lived in Mississippi most of your life, like a lot of us have, or all of your life, you already know that FEMA really comes in after the local government has already helped out after a hurricane. But I thought this was interesting. The Department of Public Safety Commissioner Sean Tindall was asked about the elimination of FEMA, and he said he supports the move.
I think we can handle it better. And in the sense that we know our state, we know our communities better, and just like in Louisiana, they're going to know it better. And we really don't know a lot about California. And when you have that centralized government for the United States, which I don't ever think it was truly intended to be this way, with FEMA operating out of DC and then trying to control so much of what's happening in the states, that they just don't have the knowledge base of what we're dealing with in our communities.
Of course, we're all aware that DOGE has been executing large-scale reductions in the federal workforce, including FEMA, and they have already eliminated 200 employees as of February. Most of those were probationary employees who had been with the agency for less than a year. Now, if you're worried about FEMA being eliminated, I wouldn't be, because we've seen Trump move funding from one agency to another. And I predict that that's what's going to happen with FEMA. They might just move the federal money. So the federal money will still be there. It's just the agency will be recalculated, right. I think is a good way to
streamline the entire process. I know that there are still hundreds, if not thousands of people who are still trying to recover from the tornadoes last week before. I actually, when I was asked to step in for Gerard today, I reached out to MEMA to see if they wanted to talk about that, but the director is traveling today. The entire process needs to be streamlined. I'm fortunate, having lived through a number of hurricanes on the coast. I never had to, living in an apartment, I never had to deal with having to deal with MEMA and FEMA. But so many people I know are still struggling to recover from storms a year or two ago. Even in Florida, FEMA hasn't been able to help from the last hurricane. So this entire process needs to be streamlined, more efficient, more transparent, and states can disperse those funds much faster than the federal government could ever do.
Absolutely. And, while we're talking about FEMA and disasters, be on the lookout this weekend. We've got severe thunderstorms capable of damaging wind gusts, large hail, and tornadoes. Those are going to kick in Sunday night, and they're expected to last through early Monday afternoon. Now, according to the National Weather Service, these storms are expected to be most numerous. Here's your line. North of a line from Bastrop, Louisiana to Yazoo City to Kosciuszko to Columbus. They've already had an impact on some college baseball action. Ole Miss had a weekend series with Florida. They beat out the Gators 7-5 on Thursday. Games 2 and 3 of this series have been moved to a doubleheader starting Friday at 3, and they're going to have 45 minutes between the 9-inning games. And I just want you to be aware of that.
Yeah, these storms look like they could produce some hail and maybe even some tornadoes on Sunday night into Monday. Kelly, in the time that we've got left here, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith picked up a big endorsement. I know you did a story about this on SuperTalk.fm. Donald Trump stepping into this race early to make his endorsements.
Yeah, I wasn't really surprised to see that. Her name was being bandied around when they were trying to pick the agriculture secretary, and they ended up picking Brooke Rollins. And I don't know if that's because Cindy Hyde-Smith said, nope, I want to stay the Mississippi senator. I'm happy where I'm at. Or if they thought Brooke was the better pick. But, she's had some, how much time do we have? Because I want to go into this real quick. She put forth the idea. Perfect. She put forth the idea of eliminating the inheritance tax to help out farmers. Now, we're still waiting on a farm bill. I love the idea of eliminating the inheritance tax in general. And she explained why this could be such a great benefit.
Is when grandpa dies or somebody dies and you get that land, so many times they have to sell half of it to pay the inheritance taxes that grandpa had paid taxes his entire life.
And Trump has been calling for tax cuts and possible elimination of the income tax. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there.
super important. This needs to be a much bigger priority to get the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act extended and made permanent. And as you talk about taxes, we'll see if that happens in this legislative session in D.C. Kelly Bennett, SuperTalk Mississippi News. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great weekend.
Y'all too. I'm Scott Sands, Scott Sands Media.